Welcome back to the Snowflap podcast, and this is going to be the third edition of Snowflap. And just wanted to say, give a shout out to everybody who's been liking us. We really appreciate the comments and a lot of great humor, but a lot of really sincerely committed people who enjoy SnowTrax TV and formerly Supertrax magazine. And we're glad to have you along for the ride. So just to review what we do, Snowflap is a podcast that is about the big picture, and I've been using that expression quite a bit. We're not about antique and classic sleds. We're not about snowcross racers. We're not about clutch kits. We're about bigger stuff that's shaped the industry, people, personalities, some really interesting stories, some downright weird ones. And basically, they're the product of my 40 years of being in the snowmobile business, in the snowmobile media, and having been there, done that, and got a t-shirt in a lot of places. So I really appreciate you tuning in again. And our numbers are spectacular, and it pushes me onward to go deeper. Sorry if the last one on coupling was a little like the water was up here. But that's a heavy-duty subject, and it needed to be explained, and people need to get some context of what coupling is all about. And I believe that by the comments, there's a certain large number of you who enjoyed it. So we'll try not to get too techy, but sometimes we have to carry it on. So here we go for episode 3. It's the transition from 3-cylinder to 2-cylinder on the two-stroke side power plants, and what that meant, that engines went from what we all knew and loved, and that was triple pipe triples, to twins. And why did that happen, and what's behind all that? Who was behind all that? So we've been jumping back and forth through about 5 decades of the sport. We're not going to be going back that far because this is more current information. But we're still going to be in the 90s and the 00s a fair bit with my explanations. So I don't want to recite diatribes of information about, early 70s sleds. I promise, as I said, I won't do that to you. But we need to give this some legitimate context, and that means we'll be drawing quite a bit of perspective from the 90s and the 00s, as I just said. So I think the topic today will turn the lights on for particularly the techies, because this did for me. This is a really interesting experience that I went through and increased my knowledge by attending press intros. And I think there'll be a bunch of you who are very technical, and I know you're there, who are going to get a kick out of this. So in my years as being in the media and editing magazines, this is a kind of an interesting story. Probably the most asked question I got in the last 10 years, from current to 10 years back, is when are the OEs going to bring out more triple pipe, triple two-strokes? Like, when is that going to happen? I'm making fun. The truth of the matter is, and I'm sorry to tell you this, they're not. They're not going to bring triple pipe triples or single pipe triples. They're not going to bring triple two-strokes back to the marketplace. It just doesn't work in the grand scheme of things, which includes EPA certification for exhaust emissions. And so two-strokes inherently are much more difficult to certify and require more intervention to make them clean than four-strokes. Having said that, the process of EPA certification is hugely expensive. You talk to engineering departments and engine department guys from any of the OEs, and they will tell you it's frightful the kind of money you got to put forward if you bring an all-new engine out, regardless of what it is, 2- or 4-stroke, twin or triple. So it's kind of interesting that the company that popularized and started the move towards big bore, higher performance twins was the same company that set the standard for triples. I mean, we've got the early Fuji triples, the XLT triple. There's lots of two-stroke examples from Polaris, but Polaris was the one who actually caused the paradigm to shift. So before we go too far down this rabbit hole, let me make this crystal clear. When I'm talking about four-stroke triples, I'll call that out. We're not talking about four-stroke triples per se. actually the emergence of four-stroke sleds bought more three-cylinder engines, but we're talking apples and oranges, okay? It's a different deal. So there's no doubt that the 80s and 90s produced some really impressive two-stroke triple-cylinder sleds. Fast, great exhaust noise, first down the lake, just awesome snowmobiles that everybody came to know and love. And therein lies the reason why that most asked question I told you about is a reality. You people, you would probably buy, if it was made available, a two-stroke triple powered snowmobile. Unfortunately, the manufacturers wouldn't be able to sell you one and are not likely to anytime in the immediate future. So it's pretty clear that in the 80s and 90s, the two-stroke triple sort of dictated the way a snowmobile looked, in a sense, because the motors were big, they were wide, and you go back into the 90s and sleds don't look anything like they do today. The front belly pan is enormous, the hood is enormous. There's just a lot of room required to shoehorn one of those motors into a snowmobile chassis. And so when that first move came with the Indy 500 triple back in '81, it started to have an effect. The triple cylinder exhaust system in particular, but the motor itself, it started to have an effect on engine packaging, but it didn't matter. It carried on right through all of the 80s and into the 90s was the decade, or more than a decade, of two-stroke triple power. So as the sled market moved into the 90s, it became pretty doggone clear that if you were going to be a serious player in the snowmobile industry, you had to build a hot rod flagship triple cylinder snowmobile. And you see that so clearly with sleds like, I had to write them down to keep track of it, sleds like the T-Cat, the ZRT 800, the Skidoo Mach Z800, and CK3 Mach Z800, the 700SX and 700SRX Yamahas, and more had followed the Polaris Indy 600, 650 into the hypersled market. So it was a big, if you look at what's selling today, it's pretty much just two things, right? 600s or 650s and 850s. That's what you've got for power. In these days, the OEs would have this kind of menu of triple pipe triples, and then they would have a whole bunch of other sleds as well, not including the emergence of mountain sleds at that time as well. So there was a lot more variant engines available in the early 90s till the mid-late 90s. So just when it seemed like everything had settled down and the OEs were content to build triple pipe triples and whatever else was needed to address the market, the hypersled market, they would build that, and everybody was kind of comfortable. And then this happens completely out of the blue at the Spirit Mountain Duluth National, I think it was ISOC at that time, Snowcross. It was around 1996. Polaris shows up, or Jack Struthers shows up, on an Indy race chassis with a 600cc twin that was obviously domestic built. And the reason this was big news is because Polaris, when they lifted the hood up on that sled and people saw under the hood, people realized that Polaris was prepared to put their money where their mouth is and to ante up and tool a high performance, big bore, bigger twin. And they did just that. They didn't stop at 600, then they went to 700, and they eventually had 800. They were all Liberty motors. They were all twins. They were Case Reed engines and impressive performers. But I remember myself feeling like, doggone it, I really like two-stroke triples. I'm not sure that I want to have a 700 or an 800 that's a twin. I think I feel better with a triple. And I know a lot of you felt that. I know the whole market felt that and wondered, what the heck was Polaris doing? I remember at that Spirit Mountain National Snowcross, the whispering going around from the other OE's camps, wondering just exactly what was going on, because they would immediately conclude that if Polaris was going to introduce and build big bore twins, then they're going to be committing to a lot of dollars to such a program. And it all kind of started, the snowball, so to speak, rolling down the hill, maybe the Spirit Mountain Hill, was picking up momentum, or started to pick up momentum right away. And I'm not going to leave you just wandering in the dark here. I'm going to explain to you why this happened. And it's not all about money. In fact, the last thing on the list is about whether a two-stroke twin or a two-stroke triple is cheaper or more expensive to produce. We'll leave that one till very last. So let's get this straight, just so we have some context here. Triples continued, two-stroke triples continued to sell well into the late 90s and early 00s. They didn't just disappear because Polaris showed up with a twin. But it became increasingly very, very clear that the future of the hypersled market was going to be, without question, rooted in twin-cylinder power. So this is an interesting story that goes along with what happened with the shift to two-stroke twins. And the lineage of these Polaris Liberty twins contains a really great story surrounding their development. Going back from 1996, a couple years, it became known Polaris had hired a guy from Kohler. Oh yeah, Kohler. And his name was Martin Heinrich. And he was, quite frankly, a two-stroke genius. And I mean that. There's a reason those Kohler engines in the snow twisters and the trail twisters and those Mercury sleds, there's a reason why they were just stupid fast and performed well. And the reason was this guy, Martin Heinrich. I had the privilege of interviewing Martin and for a feature on the XC Liberty twins and in Supertrax magazine, and that was around 99. And Martin's credentials were overwhelmingly impressive. I mean, he was the father of the Kohler engines developed for use in the legendary snow twister and trail twister, as I said. And those sleds had a great reputation. In fact, just anecdotally here, I got to be honest with you. When the great collapse of the snowmobile market occurred in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, spread right through into the later 70s, and there was like 100 brands of snowmobiles that shuttered and went away and walked away. I got to say that in those days, I felt really bad when Mercury packed it in because of all of the other brands that packed it in. And I mean this. Mercury just had, they had nice quality of finish, they had great engineering, and their sleds were fast. They were really fast, and they looked great. They looked super. And I remember shedding a tear or two when the word came out that Mercury they were folding their tent as well. So when I asked Martin during the interview, Martin Heinrich, what gave him the inspiration for the designs he used in the Kohler sled engines. By the way, Martin would pronounce Kohler this way, Kohler. Yeah, he was a German guy. And he said he bought, this is so bizarre, you're going to think I'm lying to you. He bought a bunch of books on, get this, two-stroke ship engines. I said ship. I didn't say boat engines. I said ship engines. These things have got pistons the size of hockey rinks. I mean, if you ever get a chance and you haven't done this, look up ship engines, search it, and look at the size of the displacement of them. It's not measured in cc's. It's measured in feet. So I mean, I was like, I fell off my chair. I was like, ship engines? How could that possibly have any crossover to snowmobile two-strokes? Well, incredibly, Martin said that the port timing, the read or the intake volume, the intake port size, a lot of the real rudimentary basic things opened the window for him to do some development, obviously to shrink it down. Can you imagine a ship engine in your sled? Not really. Okay, so he bought these books. He started designing the Kohler engines for the Mercury Trail Twister and Snow Twister, and he admitted that he learned a lot from those books when he got involved with Kohler. So over the years, Martin Heinrich became an icon at Polaris, and I mean this. First of all, he was a prince of a guy. He was just a super, super nice guy, and wouldn't hesitate to give you a straight-up answer about anything. And he had the respect of the whole engineering group at Polaris that at that time was led by Chuck Baxter. Sadly, Martin recently passed away, and he will be remembered as one of snowmobiling's greatest. Great guy. So I also asked Martin, because I thought it would be an interesting perspective from his perspective, who he most respected in the snowmobile engine designing arena. Who was it that he thought was the sharpest engineer or engineering team? And he made it very clear that it was Dr. Hans-Heinz Lippich. Dr. Lippich was, I believe, the director of engineering at Rotax in those years. I never had the privilege of meeting him, but I'd heard his name many times. You'll know him by this. The rotary valve. He designed the rotary valve for twin-cylinder Rotax engines. Martin thought that the rotary valve twin was a great idea and a great piece of engineering, and gave the props to Dr. Hans-Heinz Lippich. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Anyway, Skidoo did use rotary valve induction right up until the early 90s, and I would agree it was very effective. So I also asked Heinrich what he thought of Skidoo's or Rotax new at that time cylinder reed induction system. The cylinder reed design had the intake port on the back of the cylinder, the exhaust port on the front of the cylinder, whereas a case reed design has the intake on the case, the back of the cylinder has a boost port usually, and then the exhaust goes out the front. So why did Skidoo do this? Why did they jam everything into the cylinder? It had to do with lowering the center of gravity of the engine. You can push the motor further down into the belly pan if you don't have a carburetor or a throttle body hanging off the back of it. And that's true. You can also push it down by rotating the motor and getting a little more room. But the way the Skidoo wanted it, they wanted the engine, the cylinder head, to be like, and it was way lower than the seat. If you drew a straight line right through the back of the vehicle of the snowmobile. So the cylinder reed design, according to Heinrich, he said is too restrictive. He said you can't get enough transfer port and enough exhaust port to make the kind of horsepower that I would like to make with my Liberty Polaris motors. So he was honest that way too, and it was interesting. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the cylinder reed design. Skidoo has used it for years, and last time I checked, it worked pretty darn good. So another interesting piece of information we're going to talk about is, and this is shifting gears, but stay with me, the gyroscopic effect on snowmobile handling. Okay, so I get it. You're going to say, what the heck is the gyroscopic effect? There'll be some of you who know about it and some of you may not. The gyroscopic effect, to explain it very simply, is what makes a top stand up when you spin it. It's what makes a motorcycle stand up when you rotate the wheels. It makes a bicycle stand up when you spin the wheels. It's an undeniable effect that causes something rotating to want to stand up, like a motorcycle or a bicycle wheel. Okay, so we're not talking motorcycles or bicycles. We're talking about snowmobiles. Where does this come into play? In the crankshaft of the engine. The weight of the crankshaft being rotated creates the gyroscopic effect and makes the sled so it wants to stay level. It doesn't want to be turned. Now it can be turned. I'm not saying it's horrible. You're going to drive down the trail and smash into a tree because you can't steer it. It's not like that. It's a subtle effect, but it is there. And one of the Headland boys at an introduction at Daniel's Summit Lodge near Salt Lake City, I forget what sled it was being introduced, but he got into a discussion, or we got into a discussion about the gyroscopic effect, and he explained to me that all of the triples and triple single exhaust sleds that Polaris had been building for the better part of 20 years. He said they all have compromised handling. They could feel lighter, obviously because you got one less cylinder, so you lose some weight, but lighter because the gyroscopic effect is not being interfered with. So I was like, I remember getting him aside in a corner and said, you got to explain this to me again because I should know about this. It was quite a while ago. But anyway, the greater the mass you're rotating, the stronger the gyroscopic effect. And let's just go on record as saying gyroscopic effect is not a great idea for a snowmobile. A snowmobile isn't like a motorcycle. Like a motorcycle, you get off, you let go of the hand grip, it falls over on the ground and causes you $1,000 worth of repairs. A snowmobile, you get off it and stand next to it and nothing's going to happen. So in terms of a snowmobile, it's a subtle, but it is a very tangible force that can only be experienced when you ride a two-stroke twin and a two-stroke triple side by each. Or, we'll go and color outside the lines, a four-stroke triple as well. Headland's point was well taken, is if you can move ahead, you want to make an improvement in handling, and that's what everybody's trying to do year after year after year. We've got to have something new, something better, something new. He made it clear that getting rid of and reducing, you can't get completely rid of it, but reducing the gyroscopic effect will immediately have an effect on handling. Also in tandem, which makes it that much more tricky to describe, a two-stroke twin versus a two-stroke triple will weigh less, same output will weigh less. And so weight reduction was becoming a bigger and bigger thing as we moved into the late 90s, early 00s. Okay, so I think I know what you're thinking, because I'd be thinking it as well if I were you. And it's this: why are there triple cylinder four strokes and they're increasingly more popular as we head into the next decade? It's a valid question, because everything I just said about gyroscopic effect and weight and rotating mass and the weight of rotating mass, it all goes out the window, because like a four-stroke snowmobile engine, and I'm sure that everyone tuning into us today knows this, they're heavy. They are way heavier than a two-stroke. So why are they so popular? If they affect handling, you realize that the Skidoo XR, they called the chassis for the four-stroke, actually has a wider bulkhead riveted on the same tunnel. It's a big motor. Four-stroke triples are big engines. So the question is, why are four-strokes gaining any popularity at all, and why would somebody want one? Here's a laundry list for you. We'll see how this goes. Number one that we found talking to snowmobilers, they don't have to carry injection oil if they're touring and traveling long distances. Yeah, okay, I get that. There also is a belief that a four-stroke snowmobile engine will last longer, and then therefore, vis-a-vis, it will retain its resale value better than a two-stroke, because it doesn't have to have rebuilds, which, I don't know, like I hear that from the four-stroke camp, and I know a lot of guys who got two-stroke sled engines, twins, in their sleds, and they're fine. They work great. But I guess there is an argument there that four-strokes, because they have oil all the time on all the bearings and the piston skirts, whereas a two-stroke is mixing oil with the gas in the scavenging process, maybe doesn't oil as effectively. I don't know. I'm not an engineer, but I've heard this before. So others complain that they don't appreciate two-stroke smoke. And yeah, I get that, but SDI and DI two-stroke engines have really answered the call of that. You don't walk into a restaurant anymore with a bunch of people in it with snowmobiles and say that it stinks like crazy. It used to 25 years ago, but I don't see that today. So if these statements are even remotely true, those may be good arguments for four-strokes, but in my opinion, not good enough to justify the increased weight, the increased gyroscopic effect on handling. I'm sorry, but those reasons aren't in my repertoire of reasons that I don't like two-strokes and I would like a four-stroke better, because first of all, it doesn't exist in my vocabulary. I can appreciate, because I have friends who are definitely into four-stroke trail sleds, I can appreciate and respect what it is that you are talking about, and I get it. But for me, I'll take a lighter two-stroke. So as we headed into the late 90s and then the 00s, it became clear each year that twin-cylinder two-stroke power would be the way of the future for everyone. And lighter weight and less rotating mass won out over the melodious exhaust symphony that was the calling card of triple two-strokes. So as time went on, the triple cylinder two-stroke paradigm just continued to shrink and shrink and shrink, and those engines in those performance categories became twin cylinder two-strokes. We're talking two-strokes here, not four-strokes. The OEMs have certified triple four-strokes and twin cylinder two-strokes, and they provide the platforms for sleds of the future. So the OEs are happy with what they've got certified, and probably don't have any big plans to certify any revolutionary change unless something is coming. And it's kind of the cool part of snowmobile technology is every once in a while somebody comes along with a new way to do it, and yeah, and that's cool, and I'm all about that. I hope they do, but I kind of doubt in this market, and with the way the market is covered and where the sales really are, that's liable to happen at least not in the immediate future. The question that matters the most to me, and probably to you too, is moving forward immediately, are we still going to be able to have our choice of a two-stroke or a four-stroke power plant? And here's what I think about that comment. In all the world of off-road motorsport vehicles, in ATVs and side-by-sides and dirt bikes and whatever else you want to line up there, two-stroke power is absolutely necessary in the snowmobile business, because if we're going to continue to market vertical sleds and deep snow sleds, you're not going to do it with four-stroke power. It's already been tried. It's a waste of time and money. And for people who want the maximum acceleration, the maximum performance, yes, there's some formidable four-stroke turbos out there, but I'll tell you what, a two-stroke turbo is even more impressive. And when it's all said and done, to use an overworked expression again, when it's all said and done, my concern is that we would be able to have the choice of a two-stroke or a four-stroke and satisfy our needs and take on snowmobiling the way we interpret it, the way we do it, the way you like to ride the most. And you can buy a snowmobile with a power plant that suits that criteria for you. I think that's something like freedom. That's called freedom. So let's hope we continue to have the choice of two or four-stroke power in our snow rockets. And in the meantime, stay tuned. Coming up next week, we have another Snowflap podcast for you with another interesting topic. I hope this has prompted some questions and some thought on your part. Really appreciate your comments, read every one of them, and thank you very much for tuning in again to Snowflap, brought to you by SnowTrax Television.